Well, welcome to our first, hopefully not of too many, but community preparedness meeting, I guess, and this is really about planning for the upcoming floods. My name's Martin Horson and I'm CEO of Mildura City Council, and I'm here to MC this afternoon's event, and it's great to see so many here. Can I just start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land, which now comprises Mildura Rural City Council. I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, both past and present, and also acknowledge their continuing cultures and the memories of their ancestors. So today is really about providing an update on the current Murray River flood situation. And it's to give people an opportunity to ask questions and really get an understanding of what might happen over the next weeks and months. This isn't the first time we've been in this space, and depending on how experienced you are, you may have experienced some floods dating well back into the 50s. But really, what this one's about is what's going to happen in 2022. So we'll be giving some reflections on how the current predictions are and what you'll be expecting over the next couple of weeks. We'll also give an overview of what supports are available and how those supports will work moving forward. So we'll ask our speakers to come forward and give a bit of an overview of their perspective, and then we'll break it up into some question time. We've allocated about an hour, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions towards the end of the session, so we'll get through that as quickly as we can. If you could hold your questions till then, and then we'll do a Q&A session. I would also add this session has been streamed on our Facebook web page, and there will be some questions as well from our online audience, and we'll manage that as we get through it. So just for a situation update and a general overview of the SES role, I'd like to ask Mark Crittel to come and tell us all about it. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. So as most of you will already know, that floods on the Murray will last quite a long time, and this one's going to be no different. And the interesting fact about floods is that every single one of them is different. In 2010-11, we had floods basically caused by storm here in Mildura, but we did have the Murray fairly low. We did have the Loddon, the Campaspe and the Avoca flooding. In 2016, we had the Murray high and flooded through. Today, we've got a bit of everything. So we've had the Loddon, the Campaspe and the Avoca. They're coming through the lower areas at the moment, and the Bendigo ICC has been looking after those. But we know the Murray's high. Hume Weir's pouring out. Dartmouth is pouring. So the Murray's running very high. We've got, as we know, that water that goes out through the Wakul and out through the Edwards is about to all come back in. We've got the Murray and the Darling and the Murrumbidgee about to all come in. And a little bit different to 16 is that in 16 we were lucky enough that the Murray got through before the others came down. It doesn't look as good this time, so we're still working on understanding exactly what that's going to mean. But basically what we're looking at the moment is that the Mildura Weir may exceed the minor flood level of 36 metres AHD. We're talking about Monday, sort of Tuesday sort of time. The river level may exceed the moderate flood level of 37.5 around the 21st to the 25th. And we'll get to the major around that 38.5 around the end of November. There is reason there could be other rises. We are expecting some more heavy rain this coming weekend, or next weekend. Keep forgetting today's only Sunday. So yeah, there could be more rain. There could be some of those, the Avoca, the Loddon and the Campaspe could be topped up again. The other thing I want to talk about is levies. So levies on private land or in urban areas that can't build levies in town. There's no, the formal levies around town we don't need any levies here. The formal levies that are present are not predicted to overtop, so those that are already in place. In rural areas, if people do have concerns, you can ring the SES on 132 500 and we can help you out there. We've already been assisting with working on some levies, but there is a process and I need to go through. It just can't be done. So the sooner we know about those levies, the better it is. I need to go through an options analysis and make sure that the reasons that we're doing it is for an emergency. So I have an emergency power to be able to construct, pull down or replace a levy. It's just not something I can do. Any other additional levies will be constructed on advice from the hydrologist. So as we're predicting the rises along the river, we'll look at the existing levies and make any determinations on it if there's any repairs need to be made to those. Levies can be compromised through a number of different things. We see people driving over levies. We see a lot of livestock can get over levies, which does reduce the top of those levies and can cause overtopping. Sometimes trees can be in them, sometimes rabbit burrows and those sorts of things can cause issues with them. So if you do notice those or identify those, let us know. But if a levy suddenly fails, there is a risk of people being swept away. We do see people building soft levees around homes or in places. They're not constructed to a standard and they can wash away very quickly and make the consequences much worse than they would have been with a slow rising river. So what do you need to do if you need Vic SES with water coming to your home or on your property? Just ring 132 500 and that will be the flood and storm assistance line. They can assist you with anything if they can. If it's too late, then they may assist you in getting out. We do use our slogan, bag it, block it, lift it and leave. We do that for a very good reason. A lot of homes, if they're built on floodplains, you're not going to be able to levy it to put a sandbag wall around it big enough to save your property. And if you do, there's a risk of it leaking anyway. And the only advantage is the water's much cleaner when it goes through a sandbag. There is a very high demand for sandbags. We've been through quite a few 100,000 of them so far. We are in the process of getting some more sandbags up this way so that we do have them available in the next couple of weeks. What else? We are updating the warnings, so just make sure you look at Vic Emergency or the SES site. You can see what warnings we've currently got in place, and we do continue to update those as we go along. And you also your Murray River downstream, Lipperoo to Wentworth is currently in place on a, I can't remember what level, Sue? Advice. So yeah, basically what we're saying at the moment is just maintain you being informed about what's going on. Once we jack those up a little bit higher to a watch and act, it's no different to a fire. We want you to do exactly the same thing. Just watch your circumstances and act on whatever comes your way. We have observed children and people playing in floodwater. It doesn't matter if it's floodwater, if it's a fast-flowing Murray. Actually observed some kids out trying to swing in a rope swing in a tree. I think the normal position for the rope swing would have been about 3 metres under the water at the moment, but it's, yeah, if you notice, the Murray is flowing very, very quickly and it doesn't take long to get into trouble in normal times, so imagine what it's like at the moment. Never enter floodwater. If you are driving, only drive if you need to drive somewhere. If you do drive into floodwater and you decide to do that, it might be the last decision you ever make. I know that's horrible, but it's happened too many times so far. We've done way too many flood rescues. If we do ask you to evacuate through an evacuation warning or advice, then that's what we would like you to do. One of the towns I was looking after a couple of weeks ago, 95% of the township decided to stay. 50% of those people we rescued over the next 3 days. We had our pagers going off twice every minute in the first 4 or 5 hours, and then once every minute for the next 12 hours. So what we're doing, the Swan Hill ICC is still currently active. They're still monitoring the river, and we're in a process of doing a handover, and we'll take over the control of this end in the rural city and Mildura area. Once we're comfortable, that'll be a formal process, and then we'll be in control of this area. We do have staff from Vic SES, CFA, FRV, VicPol, Council, AV and AgVic will all be present in the ICC once they're in place. We also have the ADF, and we'll be utilising them as much as we can in some roles. And we also have Life Saving Victoria out. They were very active down in around Echuca and Rochester very recently. So effectively the ICC in Mildura opened today, and we're just doing what I call a passive handover. So I'm shadowing what Swan Hill have been doing, and sometime tomorrow we'll do that formal handover and we'll have it up here. In the first couple of days will only be a day shift, and Swan Hill will continue to look after night shift. And then as we see the need change up here, then that'll all move as well. We have identified a number of areas, so it's not just Mildura we're looking at. We're looking at Nangelock, Collington and Merbeen, and they've all been seen by our ICC as areas of risk and areas that we're going to monitor. So we'll be maintaining that communication with those communities as well. In addition, we're working really closely with New South Wales. So we're hoping to get the same messaging no matter which side of the border you go to, no matter which community meeting you attend, you should be getting the same information. We'll keep trying to make that work really hard, because it was something that didn't work very well in years gone by. After this community meeting, there's going to be more opportunities as we see fit. If we need to have more of these, we will. If we think there's another way that we can do this, we will do that as well. And it may be on social media, it may be through live streaming, and it might be community meetings. But we'll see what works, and we'll keep making it work better for you. Thank you.
And Mark alluded to a number of support staff from the SES that are here. We have Sue Sheldick, Jamie Macquarie, Elliot Metodic, and we also, through our support agencies, where we've got representation with John Bridgefoot from the Department of Family, Fairness and Housing, and also Brad Wilden from Mildura SES is here as well. So there's a number of people that have come out today to support. So when we get to question times, there is a number of opportunities for people to access that information. Yep.
Just one more thing I forgot to say is that you won't only see SES out on the ground, it will be all of the agencies out there helping. We all work as one, and we all work to get the same outcome. So thank you to our CFA partners and the FRV and everybody else. Thank you.
It is a good point, and I know from the 2016 and the 2011, when these things happen, we all have to, every agency that's involved comes together and works collaboratively around that. Obviously there needs to be a lead agency. We follow the direction when it's a flood from the SES, and that's why it's important that chain of command is established early on, and it's great to have them up here so early. In days gone past, sometimes that hasn't been the case, but it's really great to have them up here as early as we can. We'd like now to go to the Mallee Catchment Management Authority, and James Kellerman is going to give us an overview. James is the Operations and Community General Manager with the CMA, and he'll give an overview of how, I guess, the flows of the river are looking at this point. Thanks, James.
Thank you very much, Martin. So yeah, as introduced, James Kellerman from the Mallee CMA. I'll give you a bit of an overview first of what CMA's role is, and then we can get into the detail. So CMAs provide the lead agency, in this case SES, with localised flood intelligence in the form of inundation maps like you can see around the walls of the room today, and they're also online for those of you at home on the Mildura City Council website. CMAs gather this information from analysing observations and data from past flooding events, and we marry that with the topography of the landscape to create flood models. We've recently completed the Mid-Murray flood model, which is going to assist us in understanding where the floodwaters will go in an event like we're having now. It also identifies the impacted properties, roads and public infrastructure. The model's been created using evidence from past flooding events we've had in town. So 2016, 1993, 1974, and all the way back to 1956, which is the largest of the historical floods that we've got really good data for. The model provides potential impacts based on Murray River flow expectations that we get from the Bureau of Meteorology. So the Bureau is the lead government agency that forecasts heights for the Murray River, which for Mildura, you've heard, are currently predicted to be 38.5 metres AHD. Now, I'm sure there are plenty of you out there, like I was years ago, thinking, what is AHD? So that's the Australian Height Datum. Sea level is 0, so it's something you can compare. So if the flood's going to be 38.5 metres, what's the height of the water treatment plant? Will it be impacted? You can check it. So that's why we use AHD. When we have a prediction like 38.5, it's very important to understand the confidence with which that number has been derived. The current forecast is what is called a reach forecast as opposed to a peak forecast. And that explains the level of uncertainty that sits behind the current number. Upstream of us and upstream of Robinvale in particular, we've got the Murrumbidgee River and the Warcool and Edward Rivers, and of course the Murray River as well too. The floodwaters are making their way towards the Murray River downstream of Boundary Bend, but a lot of the flows are currently out of the river channel and on the floodplains, in floodplain forests, in creeks and wetlands, especially as it makes its way from the Murray River across to the Warcool through the Paracuta Forest. And you can understand that when you're trying to predict the timing and volume of flows, when it's out of a river channel, there's a lot of uncertainty. And so that uncertainty sits in the fact that we have a reach forecast and not a peak forecast currently. We're currently having daily meetings with the Bureau of Meteorology in an effort to tighten up those forecasts, but they are going to wait for those flows to be observed in the river downstream of Boundary Bend before we can issue a peak forecast for Mildura, which has a lot of confidence around it. But at this point in time, we do have the reach forecast, and that should be considered like a long-range weather forecast. It's a prediction that flows will be in the vicinity of the forecast, and that when we get closer to time, these will be revised, confidence will increase, and they will change to a peak forecast. We know that community finds mapping really useful to assist in preparing for floods. A number like 38.5 rarely means anything to people about impacts on their property. So this afternoon, both for you online and for you in the room here, we've got inundation mapping around the room that'll show you for a range of scenarios what may occur. The maps provided are titled 5 AEP and 2 AEP. AEP is the annual exceedance probability. It's not critical that you know it. An easier way to describe it might be the 5% AEP is a flood that might occur 5 years in every 100, whereas the 2% AEP is a flood that would occur less frequently, therefore it's higher, 2 times in every 100 years. The reach forecast that we're getting from the Bureau at the moment is indicating somewhere in between those two maps, which is why we've provided both sets for you today. And again, for those online, it's on the Mildura City Council website. You can turn on the 5 and the 2, and the current forecast is in between those two. But when planning for floods, it's wise to have a bit of a buffer, plan for the worst and hope for the best. So we would advise that you, when planning, look at the 2% flood layer because that's slightly higher than is currently forecast, and that way you'll know that you've taken precautions. Once you're looking at the maps, consider what flood preparation you may need to take in the event that that's realised. Another point to note is that, like the BOM forecasts, those maps are only a guide. Rivers are always changing, landscapes are always changing, whether it be erosion or a wind-based erosion, water-based erosion, construction or farming activities, construction of roads, all alter the way floods perform. And satellite imagery can only go so far, and satellite imagery is depended upon for a lot of the flood mapping. So, you know, we've learnt over the years, community intelligence is far better than a lot of satellite imagery. People understand when culverts have been blocked or when channels have been removed, and all that stuff is vital to us in understanding areas of risk. So we would invite you, once you are observing the maps for you here in the room today, feel free to make yourself known to one of our Mallee CMA reps. There are plenty of us. There'll be one at each set of maps around the room, and let us know about any changes you might observe. They definitely help us in informing Mark's team of areas where there could be problems. Also, we will have drop-in sessions across the coming weeks where you can meet with us out and about and do the same thing. So we're holding drop-in sessions where you can meet up with our staff, view the mapping products, let us know about those vulnerable areas and ask questions about how to prepare. We'll be joined by the Mildura Rural City Council, by SES and by Lower Murray Water. And for those of you who are interested, Nangelock Hall will be there Tuesday 8th at 3 p.m. for a few hours. Merben Community Hub will be there Wednesday 9th from 4 p.m. for a few hours. And we'll be out at Lindsay Point at the Larrigan cracking plant on Wednesday 9th at 1 p.m. And I know there's a number of people here today from New South Wales and probably listening online as well too. Wentworth Town Hall, 9 a.m. till 11 a.m. Do we know which day? I haven't got dates here if anyone can shout out. But Sunday, thank you very much. So next Sunday, Wentworth Town Hall, 9 a.m. till 11, and at the Midway Community Centre, Golgol, between 2 and 4. It's worth noting too, if you are from New South Wales and observing the maps that are here or on the Mildura City Council website, the confidence levels for the New South Wales data are lower than Victoria. Victoria's been quality assured, New South Wales hasn't because the mapping was developed for Victoria. It's an indication, but definitely head to our counterparts on the New South side for your best information. So to summarise what I've just said, BOM, Bureau of Meteorology, has provided us with a reach forecast of 38.5 metres. This should be viewed similarly to a long-range weather forecast. We've created predictive maps for you to have a look at. We recommend you focus on the 2%, which is giving you a bit of buffer for planning at the moment. We invite your feedback and advice on vulnerable areas in the room today and at our drop-in sessions over the coming days. And I would also reinforce that the Vic Emergency app is really good. The data is localised. It's from the Incident Control Centre. It's not from someone in Melbourne who thinks they might be a risk. It is actually well-founded information that can come to you in a timely fashion. So the Vic Emergency app is a good one to download. And I and all of my colleagues will be here for a fair while after today, so feel free to join us. Thanks.
James. Thanks, James. And thanks to the CMA, the background technical work that goes into that is immense, and really appreciate the time taken to bring the maps out here and so everyone else can look at that. And Jenny Collins, who's the CEO of the CMA, is also in the room somewhere. Thank you, Jenny. Been through it before and knows how important information is to really give a good understanding, but also give a reassurance about what's actually happening with the flood.
Thanks, Martin. Yeah, just want to talk a little bit about obviously what Council's role is in respect to public infrastructure and particularly around our drainage systems around all our townships. Just to start off with, basically the Council's role at the moment with the imminent flood is really about assistance to the control agency. So we don't necessarily lead what happens out there. We're basically there to provide support for, might be heavy machinery, sandbags, filling stations if it comes to that. The other thing we will be providing is engineering advice, building assessments, environmental health assessments, particularly for those properties that may be impacted in the flood. One of the issues obviously is septic tanks, so our staff will be involved in doing assessments to make sure that they're either not at risk or they're remaining operational where they're not impacted at floods. The other thing you may have noticed up until now, particularly along the riverfront, is some of the works that council staff have been doing over the last few weeks. So we're involved in protecting public infrastructure, removing things along the riverfront. You may have seen already we've started work on the dog park. Particularly along the riverfront, we have a number of toilets, public toilets, which rely on septic systems. So we're actually deactivating those and making them safe so we don't have that contamination of the river. And that'll occur over some time, and obviously as the water comes up there'll be other infrastructure that's affected as well. So council's busy doing that as we speak. Disconnection of power supply, obviously there's lights along the riverfront, there's other pumps and systems, so we're removing all of that might be vulnerable if the floodwaters come up. The other thing I just want to touch on quickly is around maintaining critical services. So that's one of the roles that council needs to maintain, obviously, when we have a flood event. So things such as maintaining curbside household waste collection. So that's something we need to make sure continues to happen. And also access to our landfills and transfer stations. So that's a critical thing. Obviously, you've seen upstream, I think, at some of the the other townships along the way where there's been a lot of flood damage, a lot of materials come out of that, which obviously needs to be put into landfill. So one of the things that we have to make sure is that landfill remains operational. So, and at this stage, we believe that is not likely to be impacted on from the high river level. The other thing too is you'll notice as you get particularly along the river, closure of roads and footpaths. So council will be closing roads as required. And I just want to remind people that if you do see a sign, please don't drive past it. We don't have all the infrastructure to provide full barriers, so please just observe those signs because you don't know what's over the crest of that hill. If there's water right up to the road just disappears, and obviously that puts people at risk. So just want to make sure that people do follow those signs. And even so, some of the walking tracks along the riverfront, they may not have signs on them too. So if you are out and about, please just be very, very careful. If you want to see the latest updates on all the road closures, by all means go to the council's website and we have a live list of the roads and footpaths that'll be closed from time to time. The other thing I just wanted to talk about is, and this is really where I suppose the biggest issue for a lot of our townships are, if we have a large rain event, large storm event, which we've probably seen a few this year, given that the water level in the river's high, what normally happens is our stormwater drains out to the river. But when we have a high river, it actually doesn't allow the water to drain out as quickly as it normally would. So what we've had to do is block some of those drains, which means the water will actually sit in our streets and potentially rise up out of some of the pits you might see in the roads as well. What we're doing to try and combat that is we've identified a number of areas around that will probably need pumps. So if we do have a large storm event, then our staff will bring pumps in and we'll actually pump that water into the river, so at least it doesn't causes greater risk to the households. In terms of the drainage system, as I mentioned before, our guys are out checking to make sure all our pits remain clear, they're not blocked, because obviously when we get blockages and heavy storm events, it does put pressure on it. So you'll see a lot of staff out and about probably in the next few weeks checking on things, and again, there might be areas where we have to close off. Some roads might be closed. If you do see roads closed and there's floodwaters there or even stormwater, please again don't drive through that, because what can happen is it causes a bow wave effect up on the properties. So even though it might be shallow water, we just ask that people don't drive through that. In terms of as it evolves, the main source of our information obviously will be our website, so please keep up to date with what's on our website. And as I said before, council's not leading this organisation in terms of the event for the flooding. We'll be a support agency for the SES, so provide a lot of infrastructure and a lot of support. Thank you.
So Victoria Police's role in this is to ensure that there's effective control and coordination and command. So we make sure that all the agencies are working together. So SES are the lead agency, and we work very closely with the SES. Probably I've been working the floods since we were at Echuca, and then I've been in Swan Hill a lot recently, and Kerrang. One of the biggest things is don't drive through floodwaters. We've done over 300 rescues of people driving through floodwaters. You only need it to be 15 centimetres of fast-moving water, and you drive through it, and it might be the last time you drive. Once you get in the water, you're going to be in enormous trouble. So don't drive through flooded waters. Often you'll drive with this flood as it's moved through from down Kahuna, Kerrang, up into Swan Hill. You drive to work in the morning and on a sort of a B road, and it's fine. You see a bit of water on the side. You come back in the afternoon to go home, and the water might be a metre high. And we're still getting people thinking that they'll drive through in their little Hyundai or something like that, or even four-wheel drives, driving through, and they get stuck. And then our staff and the SES and Fire Rescue Victoria come out and put their lives on the line to rescue those people. So please do not drive through flooded waters. Ringing 000 to find out what the height of the river is please do not do that. There's plenty of websites that you can, the CMA, the council websites, SES. 000 is for life-threatening emergencies, not for I'm wondering whether or not my property is going to be flooded. So please don't do that. And please don't call the local police station here at Redcliffs, Mildura, Merbeen, asking about River Heights. We're very busy at the moment. We've surged resources up from Melbourne, so you'll see hundreds of police up here as we're following the flood. As we move up from, I've got a lot of police in Swan Hill at the moment and a lot of specialist capabilities. So we've got swift water rescue teams, which water police, we've got police air wing, police helicopter, with swift water rescue teams on them that can winch people out very quickly if they get in trouble. But if the SES tell you to get out, evacuate, please make sure that you have a really good think about the advice. They're not flippant when they say evacuate. If they say evacuate, we want you to get out. Because what we're seeing is a lot of people go, no, I'm not going to go. And then a few days later, the reality kicks in, septic system is flooded, sewerage everywhere, and water coming in. And then again, the SES or the Victoria Police come through and rescue those people, and also the ADF with their bushmasters. And we're all not as young as I look around the room, and myself as well. It's not as young as we used to be. So when you have a plan, if you've got a flood plan and you think of it, don't think of it flood plan, I'm 20 years old. Flood plan, if you're 60, 70, 80, that's where you've got to have, that's what your flood plan needs to be. And you need to, don't go to a relative who doesn't want to disappoint you. Go to someone you trust and say, is this a realistic flood plan? Write your flood plan down. So if you are going to stay, and that's your prerogative, have you thought about medication? Have you thought about food? Have you thought about pets, livestock, all these issues, which in the livestock ag Vic will talk about. But please have a plan, and your plan might be, oh, my house will survive, but my septic's 300-400 mil down or 3 metres down or whatever. That gets flooded, and we might not be able to get to you. And you might be flooded, you might be in flood waters for weeks and weeks on end. So make sure you got, and drinking water is very, very, very important. If anyone's got firearms at home and you leave, please notify the police on 131 444, police assistance line. But it's your responsibility to have those firearms safely stored. So there might be someone else that you can go, who's got a firearms licence and can store them securely, or they can go to a firearms dealer. But please, if you have that situation, ring 131 444 and you'll be provided with that advice. So another important thing, if you do leave, turn your power off at the mains. Make sure you do that. That's really important, because if police or SES come in, we want to make sure it's safe for us. So turn everything off and at the mains. But we're planning for this flood from Victoria Police's point of view, working in with SES and all the other agencies for the next couple of months. So you'll see a lot of extra police around. And yeah, so thank you, Martin. Cheers. Thanks, everyone.
By us finding out what the agricultural losses and damages are, it helps inform the relief and recovery services. So anyone who's got any urgent animal welfare needs, or if they wish to report any losses or impacts from agriculture production, if they could please call Agriculture Victoria on 1800 226 226. Now, as John has mentioned, it is very important to be prepared. So plan and act early, particularly if you've got livestock. So keep informed of where the current situation is with respect to where the water is moving. And if you do have livestock, make sure you move it, or you might have machinery or fodder, and make sure you move it to higher ground or to another property. And in all of that planning, don't forget your pets. So they're just as important. In terms of horticultural producers, Just a reminder that any crops that are inundated by floodwaters, so covered with floodwaters, potentially there's a food safety risk. So you may find that your produce is unsaleable if you're actually being inundated. If you're uncertain, please make sure you test your produce. That goes for home gardens as well. So if you've got your home veggie patch, it gets inundated by floodwaters, please don't eat the veggies you'll need to dispose of. Livestock owners, they're reminded to be aware of any animal health issues which are brought about by the floods. And we do ask livestock owners if they could please update their PICs for their properties, so that's their property identification codes. Agriculture Victoria do have flood resources available on their website, so if you jump on there, if you've got any technical issues that you would like to get information about, if you jump on the AgVic website. Just for some additional information, Blackwater. Blackwater is where there's little or no oxygen in it, and it's usually dark in colour due to the breakdown of plants and other organic matter. Now, this contamination of the water may be temporarily unpalatable to your stock. However, it's usually not poisonous to healthy sheep or livestock, but it may harm young or weak livestock. So it's just to be aware of that. But if the livestock do have access to fresh water, they will go to that in preference anyway. And my other last point is just a message from Victorian Fisheries Authority, in that they're working closely with the New South Wales Fishery and other government agencies, actively monitoring flood conditions, and they're undertaking salvage and translocation operations for crayfish and native fish where it's feasible and safe to do so. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue. So that gives us about 20 minutes for questions. We'll just keep the questions short as possible, but we do have a roving mic floating around. So if anyone does have a question, I'll just ask you to put your hand up and we'll get round to you. Here we go. We've got one in the middle. We're off.
When we get to the peak and the levee banks are right at the top, what happens with wakeboarding boats?
Yeah, I guess the first thing we're going to be doing is talking to New South Wales because it's their water. They often get the boating authorities to close the water. We've done that in the past around Echuca, but it's not an easy task either, but we will do those sorts of things. No different than cars driving in the water either.
How far above the current level is the 38.5? So, in other words, what's the expected rise from the current level?
About 2.75 metres from where we are at the moment.
Are there any anticipated power outages coming with the 2% flood map?
So that's one of our big challenges, to try to maintain all of the utilities. So we'll do whatever we can to maintain any of our services. After that, it's in the lap of the gods, but we'll do whatever we can. So sandbagging to protect that infrastructure, but if it does get impacted, then the period of time is dependent on how much damage has been done. So a bit of a roundabout answer. I'm sorry, I can't give you a straight one.
I was just wondering about the policy, which roads are being closed or kept open maybe, because where I live we would be cut off. And it'd be good to know beforehand if that's be sandbagged or not.
Yeah, so just repeat the question. It was just around what roads are being closed off. So at the moment, if you go to our website, there's a live list of some of the roads that are already closed. And as the waters rise, obviously we'll need to close more roads. So at this point in time, we don't know exactly which roads will be. We've got a bit of an idea, but again, go to the website and that'll have that list updated.
My question's in relation to registered levies versus private levies. Private levies are going to divert water into a floodplain, as opposed to the modelling shows there's a lot of areas that don't get flooded at the moment because of private levies.
I feel your pain. That's all I can say. If we need to, if that's part of the process that we need to do that, we'll do it. There's one down the front. Keep running.
Yeah, Darryl, I think it was, it just answered the question about roads being closed. Rudd's Road down at Iraq. Now, if that goes under, we've got 6 households there that are isolated. Now, is there anything being done to keep it open?
We'll have a further look at it, but again, it probably comes back to what the level is in terms of the inundation across the road. So if it's not possible to provide levies or sandbag it, that may or may not be possible. We'll certainly work through that with the agencies about what is possible.
Just a question to get levels into context, because I don't think many people will know exactly what a level means. Now, but there would be a lot of people who'd have an understanding of where the river got to in the mid-70s, for example, and a few people where it got to in the mid-50s. Some fairly significant differences in the 70s with the flows in the Murray and the Darling being significant, but never at the same time. This time it looks like they're have peaks at similar times. Now, could you or someone up there get things into the context of those past events? Because I think that will probably be more meaningful than just a number.
Yep, I've got some data on some past heights, so that might help. So we're saying 38.5 right now. I don't think anyone will remember 1870, but that was 39.3. 1956 was 39.14, so around 600 mil higher than is currently predicted. 1931 was 38.4, so very similar. And that's probably all I can offer you at this point in time.
Can you put the high flows in the mid-70s into context, because that's something people would remember? Myself, I don't go back to 1870, unfortunately.
So 1975, sorry, I thought I went to that one, 38.17. So about 400 mil higher. But remember what I was saying earlier, this is a reach forecast currently. A lot of the water that will arrive here is not yet in the Murray Channel. So at this point in time, we've got a long-range forecast, and within a week, hopefully we've seen some of those flows materialise in the river downstream of Boundary Bend, and we'll be able to offer a much tighter prediction about what that looks like. So at this point in time, it is a planning tool, and the 2% flood layer, the mapping that is there, because a lot has changed, as one gentleman spoke there about on the ground. So where you may have been impacted in the 70s might be very different to now. So the 2% flood layer is the best planning tool right now for you to approach.
But back to the same issue, that in the mid-70s the Darling wasn't up at the same time. Very fundamental difference this time.
Sorry, I'm not clear on the question there. Yeah, and look, the Darling is coming in, and the BOM is aware of that, and that's taken into account with the 38.5 that's currently in the long-range forecast we have.
In 1975, there was a levee bank built along Colquine Way to stop the water crossing that. Just wondering if there's any plan to do something to keep Colquhoun Way open. It should be, the way I look at it, the flood flows are going to get there fairly quickly.
Yeah, I guess I'll be looking at the experts to provide me with that information. So we'll have the hydrologists in the, can't even say it, hydrologists in the ICC from tomorrow. So we'll be doing all that work on there to see what we need to do. The next part will be engaging the engineers to say, is that levy viable or able to do anything to it? So we'll look at every aspect, but at the end of the day, we can only do what we can do.
Just while you're thinking of the next question, I do have a couple of online questions. One of the questions was, will there be evacuation and relief centres? Do you want to have a go at that one, Mark? Or we do have our recovery manager here as well, so.
So that'll all be part of our process. So again, similar to the process about doing work with levies, is we need to work through a system of works to decide whether or not we evacuate people. We work very closely with the police to go through a series of questions to identify whether it's viable to do it, if it's not too late to do it, and we'll always try and work well out. And very similarly, the other end of that process is looking at whether it's safe to bring people back, and we need to make sure that's safe with all the services as well. So far as relief centres, once we've identified something needs to happen, we'll talk to the council about identifying which and where and when those relief centres open, just so that we don't open them up too early and we have people there for no reason and no services to support them.
Thanks, Mark. And I guess for preparedness, where council's certainly putting in place and got various areas around the municipality, if we were required to set up a relief centre, we're certainly well prepared for that. Another question here, what information will be provided for our culturally linguistic diverse communities and where can we find it?
Thank you. I think if I look at Sue, they've been doing a lot of work on getting the cold community information up to date, and we now have that. It'll be available on our website and on ses.vic.gov.au. I think we've also got some handouts, or we will have some handouts available.
We've got a question from the audience again.
Just another one on levee banks on the west side, Flora Avenue, and the levee banks west of all those. What sort of inspections and maintenance has been done on them?
Yeah, I won't know. I'm not a local, but I'll be guided by the locals on the condition of the levees, and then by the hydrologists and the CMA to help me.
Yeah, look, I suppose there's a bit of a grey area around the levees that were built back in the 50s. We, as a council, haven't done any inspections other than sort of observing what the height is in relation to the river. There hasn't been any plans about the structural integrity for some time. We can't rely on what's already there and we can't guarantee it, but obviously we'll be talking with the SES and CMA about the modelling and see what that means in terms of the existing structural integrity of the levees.
There's one here about volunteering opportunities. How can we help?
This is always a really challenging one, and we're really relieved that the disaster is, DRA, Disaster Recovery Australia. It's a volunteer organisation founded by military people. They've moved in down south into Rochester to help out down there. The other part is that if community groups want to do that sort of work, then they can do it. The challenge we have is for people to come and do that volunteering work for us. We're unable to cover you for insurance-wise. That's our biggest challenge. But DRA and some of those other agencies can do that for us.
How you going? When we talk about the level 2, like metres doesn't mean much to me, so probably doesn't mean a lot to other people here. Is the water treatment plant in danger?
We're currently we've had done, I haven't. Swan Hill, who's been looking after this area until today, has approved some works around the treatment area to protect that, and hopefully that's what that work will maintain the integrity of that.
There was an online question on that very question. So we're talking about the 7th Street treatment plant, which is obviously relatively close to the river. That's controlled by Lower Murray Water, so obviously they'll be in close contact with the SES and also looking at what support's available. We got any more audience questions? While we're doing that, we've got one here, sandbags. Where and when? We got the Commissioner for Sandbags.
I think they're at the SES unit. Sandbags, yep. So sandbags and sandbagging equipment will all be at the SES unit in Mildura, yep.
That level, you're saying 38.5 in Mildura. Now, in a normal river, at Bruce's Bend, it's only 50 mil higher. In this flood event, 38.5 in Mildura, Bruce's Bend can be up to 1 metre higher. How do we get those heights? Because it's not, you're saying 2.7 above, but it varies. Nangelock jumps up quicker than it spreads. Comes down here, Bruce's Bend goes a lot higher than what it would in a normal river.
Yeah, that's right, and that's called the tailwater, so obviously all the way through the river the heights vary, and it's at a point, so the Bureau of Meteorology forecasts to a location. In this case it's Chafee Graveyard, just downstream of the main weir, and you're right, so there is a difference. The maps that are shown here take that into consideration, so the model considers that. So if you're looking for your property, that factor has been considered, and the maps do show depth up to 1 metre, but they don't go beyond 1 metre. So for a highly specific site, if you're after a metres AHD, you'd need to have a survey point at your location so you know your metres AHD, and then a hydrologist, such as that sits in the Incident Control Centre, can determine the height of water at that location. But it will always be an approximation because the Bureau only has so many forecasted locations that they point to, so it will be using the tailwater assumption, which you're describing is dynamic at different flow rates, which no doubt it would be. So it will always be an approximation.
My question is, on the topographic map that we have for our area, Benetook Avenue's at 38 metres, so that would suggest that Benetook Avenue between Curitin and the river will be 0.5 metre underwater. Is that right?
Not necessarily. It would have to have a flow course from the river. So there are many locations away from the river which are lower than the predicted flood height, which will not be inundated because it's not that there is a sandbank or a ridge in between the two. So the mapping accounts for that. So if you look at the mapping that's provided in the room or online, that will provide an indication of whether you will see inundation there or not.
Coming. Just on that too, I think the SES Council and the CMA are doing a lot of work behind the scenes identifying where some areas may well be inundated. So if you are worried about that, certainly contact either the SES in the first instance, and they'll be able to guide and give you some advice. But we are, I think the SES are being very proactive there. They're actually making contact with people. So if you haven't been contacted yet and you are worried about it, then certainly it's worthwhile examining that. Look on the map and then contact the SES. But just bear in mind there is a lot of work going on behind the scenes just to identify those particular areas. Obviously, people in lower areas close to the river where there is a flow path may well be contacted in the next week or so. But certainly, if you're worried about it, contact the SES. We've got one over here.
Just wondering if you can give me an idea of the flow rates at Colignan or Euston. The height in Mildura doesn't mean anything to us out there.
Yeah, definitely. And all of this information that I'm quoting to is available publicly on the Bureau of Meteorology website. They've got a water data online tab and you can click and figure out what a certain height means in a flow rate. Again, we are in the long-range forecast, so I'll put that caveat on it, but we're in excess of 200,000 at Euston, so around 220, somewhere in that vicinity at the moment. Slightly above the 1975 is the current prediction. Yep.
We've had just a query on what grants and so forth support's available. Obviously, grants are there for people that have been impacted, and there has to go through the assessment. But if you're certainly in a business that's been impacted, or if you find yourself in an inundation situation, there are grants available. But I might ask Sue just to give a brief summary of the grants that are available.
Sure. So this is for primary producers. So if you've been impacted by the floods, there's a $75,000 grant to cover the cost of recovery and get businesses up and running again. There's also a $25,000 grant to cover costs of disaster impacts for small-scale producers. There's up to $250,000 to restore or replace damaged equipment and infrastructure, or to cover the short-term business expenses on concessional loans. And there's also a primary producer transport subsidy, so that's up to $15,000 to support the transport of emergency fodder or stocked drinking water and the movement of livestock. I think it also will cover some of movement for produce as well, but that's all these grants are available through Rural Finance, so they're the ones to ask the questions.
Thanks, Sue. And if you're not a primary producer, there is grants available through the Emergency Recovery Victoria website. So these are obviously people that have been impacted that aren't primary producers, but that's the Emergency Recovery Victoria website as well. So you have to wait till you're impacted, but if you are finding that you're in that space, then certainly get on the website and contact them. So that's really time. Are there any last questions? Well, last question.
There's two of us.
Two of them.
Is there an easy way to find out what the AHD of your house is? Is that on your house plans at the council, or I tried working it out online and I reckon I needed a rocket scientist degree to do it.
I'm sure that's a complicated answer, so I'll hand to our expert, James.
There might be someone from council who's more informed on this, but certainly if the home is recent, those homes all have to be built 300 millimetres above the 1956 flood level. So if you've got a recent home, I can offer you that. But as for figuring it out, I'd say it would be a survey. Daryl, what?
Yeah, look, we may have some information, so if you give us a call at council maybe tomorrow, we can probably have a look on the plans and to see what your height is.
Last question. One more question for James. James, I spoke to an old farmer this week, and he explained to me something's changed since the 75 floods that I find quite interesting, and I'm wondering whether it's part of your modelling. There's basically been a levee bank built since then, also known as the new bridge. And if you look at that bridge as opposed to the bridge before that, there was the ability for a lot more water to go under the old bridge than the current bridge. It's probably particularly relevant to the people that live in the marina, considering the flood level we're talking about, which isn't where it might get to, is already going to impact them greatly, I think.
Yeah, so definitely if there's a blockage in a flow course, that does change the path of water. But the buildings in the marina too were built after 1956 and more recently, so they're well and truly above the 1956 flood level. And you'll see on the mapping, if you have a look there, there's been a number of bridges as we've been going through this flooding event from Echuca downstream, where you can see, even in Swan Hill, once you get to a certain height, you can see the bridge holds water up and it moves sideways. So not an old wives' tale, he's on the money. Things in watercourses do change flow rates, but in this case, it is taken into account in the model, and the homes that are in the marina will be protected from that.
Thank you. Just in closing, could you just put your hands together for the panel? I think from the questions and the information that's provided, it's been really useful, and you never stop learning about these things. I'd also like to acknowledge the support staff. There's a number of agencies that come together. The SES, obviously, that convened the meeting. A lot of staff from council, particularly in our communications area, have been planning for this, together with other supporting agencies. Thanks to the Mildura Sporting Precinct for hosting us as well. It is I guess a little bit of an anxious time, particularly if you are in the pathway of the river. Our thoughts are with you, but there is a lot of help and support out there, and I guess it's a matter of fact that we're all in this together, and we are there to help you. It's just a question of reaching out and staying as informed as much as you possibly can. I think that's really important. Looking at accurate information, perhaps not reading the first post on Facebook would be not such a good idea, but maybe looking at the more relevant data and contacting those supporting agencies is important. Thanks for coming out, thanks for your interest, and hopefully we'll see you at the next meeting. Thank you.